Hi everyone! We'll continue this week talking about writing personal narratives, and this week we're going to dig into the process of writing a personal narrative, and this lecture will provide you with a guide or a sort of roadmap for that process and help you as you start to write your first formal essay, which is a personal narrative. So let's get started. So whether you're writing a narrative for personal reasons or in response to an assignment, and whether you get to choose your own topic or work with an assigned topic, it's important to write about something that matters to you. And I think I talked about this a little bit in the last lecture, but it's not only important that it matters to your audience, it's very important that it matters to you, the author, because your audience will sense if a topic isn't interesting to you or if you didn't feel passionate writing about it. So for our purposes, for the personal narrative, choosing a topic can be difficult because you're deciding to share something personal about yourself. So you'll need to choose an experience or an event that you feel comfortable sharing in some detail with an audience. And be sure that, again, that experience is not only important to you, but it's also of enough general interest to engage your audience. And for our purposes, your audience is primarily me or your classmates, right? Or you can kind of imagine an audience for yourself. But we'll get to that in just a few minutes. First of all, you'll want to consider your rhetorical situation. And by that, I mean the circumstances that affect a piece of writing or another form of communication. So the rhetorical situation of a personal essay is going to include several factors, and those are listed here. So audience, purpose, stance, and context. Let's talk a little bit for a minute about audience. When you're writing any piece of writing, you have to consider who your audience is and how to reach them. So who will be reading what you write, and what's your relationship to them? These are some questions to ask yourself. Will your audience have any knowledge about your topic? Will you need to explain anything or provide any background information? And that's especially important to consider in a personal essay when you're describing an experience that has happened only to you, right? It's strictly personal to you, and so I and your classmates are likely going to have no information about what you're writing about already, and it will rely on you to deliver that information to us through your writing. Another thing to consider about your audience is how alike or unlike you are they. Consider age, gender, income, cultural heritage, political beliefs, all of that. How will those factors affect how you tell your story? And so these are all decisions that you, the author, have to make. You're not going to have people walk up to you and say, "Hi, I'm your audience." You have to decide in your mind who you're writing for, and again, how best to reach them. Another important factor to consider regarding the rhetorical situation of your writing is your purpose. So why are you writing this narrative? Yes, you're writing it because I've asked you to, and you're taking a class. But beyond that, what is the significance of the story you're telling? What do you hope it will demonstrate to your readers? Remember that your narrative needs to do more than just tell an engaging story. It has to make a point of some kind. In other words, it has to have a purpose. And then when you think about your stance, you have to ask yourself, am I telling a story that's very personal, or is it one that I have some distance from? How do you want to present yourself as the narrator? Do you want to come across as funny, amusing, witty, if you're telling a humorous family story? Or do you want to come off as more serious, maybe more sincere, and have a more serious tone as you present your story to your reader? So that's your stance. You can also think of it as tone. And then with context, you have to consider the larger context within which your narrative falls. So what broader issues are involved in your narrative? What else has been said and written about your topic, if anything? Even if your narrative is personal, how might it speak to a larger topic? If you're writing about yourself, how does your personal narrative speak to issues of class, race, gender, all of these larger issues that we have to consider as humans on this planet. So considering the larger context for your narrative can really help you see it from perspectives that are different from your own and present it in a way that will interest others. So as with any piece of writing, you have to explore your topic. In other words, you have to do a little research. So what does it mean to do research when you're writing a personal narrative? Well, it means you have to do research into yourself, so to speak. So that might involve extensive free writing, trying to jog your own memory. You're researching or exploring your own memory when you're writing a personal essay. So free writing is a really good way to begin the process of writing before you even start writing the essay itself. Try jotting down everything you remember about the experience you're describing or the place you're writing about. Make a list of sensory details. So those are details of sounds, smells, textures, colors, and so on and so forth. List as many specific details as you can and try to gather all of those details and that information together to form a really solid foundation for yourself as you begin to write your essay. What details are going to engage your audience? So not all the details that you jot down in the exploratory stage will actually make it into your essay, and it will be your job as the author to go in and choose the ones that will engage your audience and support your main point. In addition to sensory details, try to write down direct quotes or dialogue that you can remember from an experience that will help bring your story to life. We talked a little bit about point of view in the last lecture, but for the personal narrative, it's really important to choose the point of view that you're going to write about. And for our purposes, you'll be writing from the first person point of view because you're recounting a first person personal narrative. So that is from the point of view of I or we. If you're telling a story in which you are the central participant, that's almost always going to cause the point of view to be the first person, that I, we point of view. Also think about what verb tense will be most effective for establishing the point of view of your narrative. So most personal narratives that are arranged in chronological order are written in the past tense. So for example, when I was 12, I discovered what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. That would be recounting a narrative in the past tense, particularly if you're telling that narrative in chronological order, in the order in which events occurred. However, if you want readers to feel like they're actually experiencing an event, you might choose to write it in the present tense. And that might be a little more difficult, but it could be an interesting way to present your narrative. It's up to you, the author, to decide what style, what voice your essay has. So really think about these little things, not just the big topic, but the small, minute aspects of your essay, those I's, those we's, those verbs throughout. Okay, and your next step is to organize and then start writing. So once you've gathered all of these details, you've researched your own memory, you've thought about what event or what significant moment or place you want to write about, then you're ready to start. So a few things are really important to consider. You want to consider your main point and always keep it in your mind. So as you begin to draft, type out that point as a sort of tentative thesis. Now for your personal essay, a thesis in the traditional sense is not required, but you do need to have a main point. Again, this goes back to that idea of purpose and making sure that you're writing, any piece of writing has a clear purpose and a point. The next step is to organize your information. Ask simple questions. What happened? Where did it happen? When? Who was there? And what details can you describe to make the story really come alive? You have to decide, again, whether to present the narrative in chronological order, in reverse chronological order, or in some other organization that you feel works best for your narrative. And then you're going to draft an opening. A good introduction always draws the audience into your story and makes them want to know more. We can see this in other mediums, not just writing, but the beginning of a movie has to draw us in, right? It has to capture our attention in some way. Your opening of your essay has to do the same thing. Sometimes you'll need to provide a context for your narrative in your opening to describe the setting and introduce some of the people before getting on with what happened. And other times you might start in the middle of your story or at the end and then circle back to tell what happened. So remember that your opening or your introduction doesn't always have to start at the beginning, but it does have to give us valuable information and situate us somewhere in your narrative so that your reader will feel present and grounded and along for the ride with you as you tell your story. And then you're going to draft a conclusion. So if you organize your narrative chronologically, you'll likely conclude by telling how the story ends. But make sure your readers see the point of your story. So if you haven't made that point clear, you might end by saying something about the story's significance. Or you might be discussing the story's significance throughout the essay. Again, it's up to you how you organize your essay, but keep these points in mind as you start writing. So again, that main point, your general organization and order, and really get a strong opening and a strong conclusion on the page. So once you've got a draft on the page, here are some questions to ask yourself after you've read back through your draft and you're asking, what else does my draft need? What does this essay need to be successful and strong? So just like we were talking about before, how does the opening capture the audience's interest? Does it capture the audience's interest? Is it clear from the beginning why you're telling the story that you're telling? And have you given readers a reason to want to find out what happened? If the answer to that question is no, then how else might the narrative begin in a way that will grab your reader's attention? So think about the Annie Dillard essay that we read for this week, Total Eclipse, and look back at how it begins. That first sentence is really striking. It had been like dying, that sliding down the mountain pass. It had been like the death of someone, and so on and so forth. So what a strange opening that really piques the reader's interest. It had been like dying. You know, what is it? That's what I, the reader, ask myself. What is she talking about? And why was it like dying? So that's just one example of a way to really draw your reader in right from the very first 4 words. And again, think about point of view. Who's telling the story? And have you maintained a consistent point of view? For your essays, for this first formal essay for our class, that point of view is you, the author, the I. Is that consistent throughout the essay, or are there variations in point of view, and can you make that completely consistent throughout? Is the setting of your story clear? Have you have you situated the events in a well-described time and place? So for your essay, that's incredibly important because as you'll see when you read the assignment for the first essay, it's all about setting and place. And place is essential and central to this personal narrative that I'm asking you to write. So if the setting of your story isn't clear, then the essay has a lot of work to do, right? So make sure that setting is clear. Think about Annie Dillard's essay again. It's all about a particular experience in a particular place, and that place and its environment and setting is abundantly clear throughout the essay. The essay relies on that setting to tell its story. Is the story easy to follow? As you're reading back through your draft, if it's at all confusing, ask yourself, would transitions help my audience follow the sequence of events better? And if it's a lengthy or complex narrative, would something like headings help guide my reader through my story? Are there enough vivid, concrete details? So this is a really important question, and one you'll find you'll be asking yourself a lot with this personal narrative. Is there an appropriate balance between showing and telling? You know, have you included any dialogue or direct quotes from that experience? And if not, would adding some help the story come alive? But again, really think about sensory details with these vivid, concrete images and details that you include in your narrative, especially because you're going to be describing a particular place or a kind of place to your reader. And you want them to be able to see, smell, touch, hear everything that you can or heard or saw in that place. So again, make your reader feel like they're there with you. And you do that through these specific, vivid, concrete details. Another very important question to ask is, does the story have a clear point? Is that point stated explicitly, so very clearly for the reader? And if not, should it be? If the main point is implied rather than stated, is the significance of your narrative still clear? And I'll repeat that. Is the significance of the narrative clear? This is very important when you're writing your personal narratives for this first essay. And one last question to ask yourself as you're reading through your own draft is, how satisfying is the conclusion? No matter what information you're providing the reader in the conclusion, is it satisfying for the reader or for you as you're writing it? So consider that as you write. Not just, is my writing going to satisfy my reader, but does it bring me any joy or enjoyment in writing it? And Robert Frost has a quote that's, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. No joy for the writer, no joy for the reader could easily be said as well. So make sure that the passion and the joy that you feel in writing your narrative comes across to your readers so that they feel it too.